It's our pleasure to be sponsors of the SEL Virtual Summit this year. CASEL has done just a great job of pivoting, like the rest of us, to create an event that I'm sure will be very engaging, and we're just so happy to be a part of it and to be partners with you all for many, many years as well. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm going to start us off, but Rachel will also. I'm Jennifer Sanderlin with Committee for Children. I'm an Education Partnerships Regional Manager. I've been doing this work for about 7 years, working directly with schools and districts to bring social emotional learning, bullying prevention, and child abuse prevention resources to their schools and districts and to help with those initiatives and efforts. Before that, I was a classroom teacher, and for about 15 years, I worked in after school and early learning and summer programming as a nonprofit director. So almost 25 years or so almost in the education field. And it's just I'm so grateful to be a part of this work on this scale, being able to work with many districts and schools. I work mostly in the South, but our organization is a global nonprofit that I'll tell you a little bit more about here in just a moment. Rachel, do you want to say hi?
Sure, I'm Rachel Cam, and I am a Senior Product Manager at Committee for Children. I've been at Committee for Children for over 13 years now in program development. I've worked on just about every program that Committee for Children has developed, and I am currently focusing on the adult educators. So I'm really excited to be working on a program that focuses specifically on the adults. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that after Jen does her part. So very pleased to be here today.
Wonderful, thank you, Rachel. All right, so let's just dive in, but before we do, I just wanted to give you a little background about Committee for Children. I know that Emily gave a little bit already. Our mission is to foster the safety and well-being of children through social emotional learning. We are really part of the pioneering group that CASEL is as well. I've been doing this work for a really long time. We've been in operation since 1979, so over 41 years. It's been extremely rewarding to have such a great reach. Our programs reach 16.5 million children every year, so we're very excited for that reach. We are also a force in advocacy. We work to help pass policies and laws that support social emotional learning, of course, bullying prevention, and child protection at the state and federal level. So you definitely probably know us most by the Second Step program, but we are, as a nonprofit, we're really concerned with making sure that every child has access to social emotional learning. If you're interested in being more involved in our advocacy work, I invite you to join us. Just go to our website, cfchildren.org, and there's some very easy ways to get involved. All right, so I'm just going to give you a little, roadmap to today's presentation and what we'll cover. We're going to discuss how students have previously experienced trauma, are actually facing increased risks during the COVID-19 pandemic. We will define resilience and learn how to nurture it daily. We will learn how to support and empower colleagues under stress. And lastly, to discover some strategies and activities that are available in the free resource that can support students during this time. I want to first start, though, with a video that will help kind of give us a little bit of background of why social emotional learning is so important right now in this moment in time. So I'm going to go ahead and share that video. And here we go.
Challenging, unprecedented, uncertain. These words all describe what we're experiencing right now as students, educators, and families are faced with navigating a new normal. But as we plan for the school year ahead, one thing is clear: the intrinsic value of social emotional learning, or SEL. Here's why. 1. SEL can foster a sense of safety and be used with trauma-sensitive practices. Students can't focus on learning if they don't feel safe and supported. The COVID-19 pandemic and the crisis around systemic racism have created traumatic experiences for many families. These experiences contribute to fear, anger, and anxiety, and increase the risk of toxic stress. As part of a trauma-sensitive approach, SEL can help students manage their emotions in a safe and supportive way and set them up for learning success. 2. SEL helps build positive connections and relationships. This upcoming school year involves a lot of uncertainty, and site closures have made it difficult to maintain the strong relationships that previously developed between students, teachers, and families. This fall, whether you're planning for in-person or remote teaching, using SEL to build trusting connections within your learning community can help lay the necessary foundation for academic learning. 3. SEL helps address the learning inequality caused by school closures. Remote learning is inherently challenging and not always appropriate developmentally. Students who are already struggling socially or academically are often the ones who face more severe challenges with remote learning. SEL can play a key role in helping students build the skills they need for effective learning, from self-regulation to problem-solving, especially in an out-of-school setting. 4. SEL provides support to teachers and staff. It's more important than ever to care for educators' well-being. By helping teachers and staff manage stress, build trust with students and colleagues, and stay engaged at work, SEL can strengthen the whole school community. Now is the time to bring SEL front and center. But don't just take our word for it. In a recent survey by CASEL with responses from 37 states, 84% reported that SEL has increased in importance as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And 78% of states reported that district-based SEL requests have increased since the beginning of the pandemic. We often talk about SEL in terms of improving behavior or its academic benefits. But SEL also builds skills that help bring us together in times of crisis and in everyday life. And in this uniquely challenging moment, SEL is a critical tool in both addressing the immediate needs of students, families, and staff, and helping them succeed in the new school year.
So I want to just talk to some of the aspects of adversity and trauma and how that's affecting our students and how that is setting the stage for what educators can be doing to help. So first, this image represents the situation that was before the COVID-19 pandemic, that 25% of young children in America were living in poverty, according to analysis of the US Census data that was in the fall of 2011. So that's 1 in 4 American children. What we know now too is that poverty rates are worse for minority children. In fact, 3 times higher for Black children and almost 3 times higher for Hispanic children as compared with white children. So you look at this number, this was before the mass unemployment and job loss due to the pandemic. We can really assume that these numbers are higher and that when we emerge from this crisis, as I know that we will, that the numbers will be higher still once some of that economic support that people are getting, unemployment and so forth, once that is gone, then the support, these numbers will indeed be higher. So no matter where you live and no matter what type of community, the numbers of people that are in need for housing or food are already higher and just expected to persist and of course increase. But living in poverty is really just one aspect of adversity. There's also a cluster of other adverse experiences that have become known as ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. This is a term that's used to describe all types of abuse and neglect and other family difficulties that affect individuals under the age of 18. So also there are what's called adverse community experiences. So the first to consider, I just want to say about community experiences that really overarches many other things is structural racism, which can be a significant contributor to poverty as a community, housing instability, food insecurity, things like immigration concerns, and community violence. So no doubt many of you know that some of your students are dealing with both the adverse childhood experiences and adverse community experiences. And these are really being exacerbated during the COVID-19 pandemic and the stressors that come along with it. So one result of having experienced ACEs can be traumatic stress. And child traumatic stress occurs when children or adolescents are exposed to traumatic events or situations. And this exposure overwhelms their ability to cope with what they have experienced. So where are those students that are experiencing trauma? Thinking about that question, I just actually want you to pause here for a moment and think about a child, or maybe it's a family that you know from your school community who you are maybe worried about that might be experiencing trauma. And I just want to take a few seconds to just kind of picture them, hold them in our hearts and minds, so that when we talk about trauma, that we keep our learning connected to real children and helping them as they are in every classroom, in every school, every socioeconomic status bracket, every ethnic or cultural group, and at every age. So this slide shows the impact of that traumatic stress. Decreases in self-regulation of behavior issues may surface or get worse, and achievement may go down. Students have experienced trauma, are living with a traumatic stress that are much higher risk of being further traumatized by the COVID-19 situation. So the big takeaway here is that children experiencing traumatic stress will be more easily triggered by the COVID-19 situation, and it may make it harder for them to focus on their learning at home, maybe more reactive to their caregivers and their teachers. Understanding this, having reasonable expectations of what students can or can't do in their current situation, not putting undue pressure on students, all of those things can really help with their coping through the academic pressure, and actually on top of everything else can escalate their stress. So I know many of you do feel pressure to make sure kids are learning, and the reality is at this time it may be very hard for them to learn, for some kids to learn. According to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, that experiencing a prior traumatic event does not toughen up a child. Instead, the effects add up. This means that children who repeatedly witness violence, they're more apt to have more intense reactions to another trauma. And for students who are already dealing with a trauma at home or at school, again, these experiences layer on top of each other and can significantly impact their development. So some of the things that we are seeing in this COVID-19 pandemic is bringing a host of new and difficult experiences: fear and anxiety, loss of income, food insecurity, social isolation, and so on. All of these things will inevitably increase family stress. And although staying home, having sheltering in place or quarantine, that may help to flatten the curve of the COVID-19 pandemic trajectory, but home isn't always the safest place for everyone during this time of uncertainty. We just need to remember that the increased stress in homes may lead to rising numbers of child abuse cases. The literature indicates, unfortunately, that economic uncertainty is associated with increases in harsh parenting, which may be a risk for child abuse. And as school closings, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, children will potentially have an increased online presence and be in a position potentially that puts them in inadvertent risk. So that's just something to think about as parents and educators and children, to think about those dangers of online activity. And also to consider is the losses of friends and family, through illness or isolation, that can amplify the stress, and the heartbreak can reduce the levels of support. All of these will damage a sense of safety, could be potential to be traumatizing, therefore increasing the rates of that childhood traumatic stress. All of these can also be traumatizing for the adult caregivers themselves, who may be triggering for those who have ACEs in their own lives. And that's true for educators too. So I do want to note here that students of color, especially Black students living with systemic racism, puts them at a much higher risk for traumatic stress-induced negative outcomes as it is. But in addition, we know that the pandemic has affected poor Black communities more than any other group. So those children have a higher likelihood of being, having experienced someone who's been ill, hospitalized, maybe even died in the last few months. Their parents may be grieving, they may be managing financial hardships, or just seeing their parents worrying. So all children, even if they haven't themselves experienced a tragedy, are experiencing, seeing the news, hearing people talking, and they may be really worried about what they will do if their parent gets sick. So in other words, for children experiencing traumatic stress, especially poor Black students in particular, the stress of the pandemic, really could just be something, the straw that breaks the camel's back. So that may leave you with wondering what you can do to help them. So, listening to this so far, you're probably picturing a lot of those families that are under stress and maybe getting more concerned. So I want to leave you, before I pass it off to Rachel, with some of the underlying practices and the big ideas that underlie the trauma-sensitive practices, is really providing safety and support for students, which includes safe and supportive relationships. No student, but especially no student who is experiencing trauma, they cannot learn if they are not feeling safe, and they do not have support. So another foundational practice is the implementation of an evidence-based social emotional learning program. Students who experience trauma often struggle with self-regulation, including emotion management and executive function. So learning those skills and being with peers who practice them, even in a remote environment, and an adult who models them can make a huge difference. Staff training is also critical. This is about understanding trauma, the impact of trauma, how to see children's behaviors through a trauma lens. The trauma lens means that when students display that dysregulated behavior, it's not asking what's wrong with them and how can you fix them. It's really thinking about what they've experienced and what's happened to them. So the training should include how to respond to those behaviors in a supportive way, and in general, how to provide that safety and support for students. And then really the last thing I want to mention is that preventing the re-traumatization in school setting is another key practice. This means implementing bullying prevention and child protection programs as well. So as I finish up, I'll just leave you with some things to be mindful of, and Rachel will go into more detail here, but staff needs support too. I just sort of listed all the risks and all the things that have come into play for students and caregivers, but staff have also experienced stress and trauma in their personal lives. They've lost access to their professional community and the ability to collaborate in the ways that they used to. I know that has affected us and me in my personal life too. They've had to learn a host of new skills and practices to teach remotely, and a lot of times without very much guidance. And lastly, they can't support students without being supported themselves. So with that, we're going to move to this question, and Rachel will take over.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Yeah, so Jen segued into this, why do educators need SEL for adults? Before we dive a little bit deeper into this, I want you all to think about this question. What's the most stressful part of your job right now? And it would be great if you could just write some of your responses into the chat function. I think everybody has the capability to do that, just so we can feel each other's pain a little bit.
Technology, that's coming through loud and clear. As Jen sort of alluded to, not being connected to colleagues. Never-ending change and having to innovate, not being able to see or hug our children. Too many priorities all at one time. uncertainty, a lot of uncertainty.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing some of those. So yeah, we're talking about a lot of stress right now. When we started thinking about developing SEL for adults, we were already thinking about teacher stress. Teaching is demanding. It's not only stressful, it's demanding. It can be isolating. As educators, you spend less than 5% of your time collaborating with peers. Meetings like we're having right now, this webinar, that's a luxury for most educators. Educators carry a big responsibility. Outside of the family, educators are the most important figure in a child's social and emotional development. It's a privilege, but it's also a huge responsibility. Educators also face high levels of scrutiny. Everybody seems to have opinions about what educators do, your performance, your curriculum, your grading, even how much time you have off. And as we talked about, teaching is stressful. Most of us already know that teaching is one of the most stressful professions. That stress can affect your health and your job satisfaction. So these statistics that I'm going to read, a couple statistics, these were before the pandemic. So 46% of teachers report significant amount of stress and burnout. More than 41% of teachers leave the profession within 5 years. So we'll have to see what those statistics look like in another year. So hang in there. When teachers are stressed, it can negatively affect student learning. So that's a lot of bad news. But on the plus side, there are decades of research to show that when teachers feel well, they write better lessons, they're more able to engage their students, roll with the punches, and react in helpful ways when things don't go as planned. Okay, but then there's a pandemic, which means even more stress for the adults and the students right now. So my team at Committee for Children had been keeping the demands and the stresses that we just talked about of educators top of mind as we were developing the program specifically designed for adults SEL. And that program is currently in development and scheduled to be released in 2021. But we started thinking 2021 feels like a very long ways away considering the amount of stress that educators are experiencing right now. The Resilience During Crisis module is our response to that need. Resilience is our ability to cope with and recover from adverse events in our lives, and it can be strengthened, but it also can be worn down by stress and fatigue and inadequate support. So we've been working really hard to add this additional module to our SEL for Adults program, and it is now being field tested. We are designing this module to not only help educators cope with their own stress, but also give you strategies for helping each other and helping your students cope as well. This is an open field test, meaning it's open and free to all educators, and you can participate now through December 31st. So the next part of this webinar, I'm going to walk through the elements and some of the content that's included in this module. And if you have any questions along the way, just write them down, and I hope to have time to respond to them at the end of this webinar. And if I don't, we can follow up with you afterwards. Okay, why resilience during crisis? I'm going to start off this opening video for the module that explains a little bit as to why this is so important right now. But while you're watching this video, I want you just to think about how has this crisis impacted you and your community? So, okay, here's the video.
We're living in extraordinary times. The effects of the crisis have been traumatic for everyone. COVID-19 has chipped away at the resilience of a lot of people. We can see impacts when it comes to our sleep. We don't eat or exercise in the same ways that we normally would. Our relationships with people, those may be disrupted where it's difficult to trust and have the ability to connect with one another.
Every person handles a crisis differently. Some people might be frustrated, and some people might be sad, and some people might just push away. But we have to still build on community and still say, hey, you're a part of our community and we want you here. What can we do to help you?
In my conversations with teachers, I hear a lot of fear and feeling a sense of concern about their responsibility for keeping the children safe. Typically, when there's a trauma, it is short term and then you have a recovery phase. When you're recovering from a trauma, it is important to recognize that you're going to have good days and bad days. There's an ebb and flow to recovery, and emotion is not fixed.
I've had to come on my campus without any students or without any of my colleagues, and it's the hardest thing to do. To walk into a ghost town school, I miss my students, I miss my colleagues, I miss seeing kids who love being at school.
There he is. High five moments right there. Yes.
Have a great day.
I am proud that we make it a daily routine that we say hello and we bring energy and we high five and we give hugs and we laugh. Walking a campus without it is one of the worst experiences I've had. As leaders, we have to be ready for this. We have to understand that each day is a new day.
As we return to school, I think it's very important to start with social-emotional learning and building resilient skills. If we were to come in and start focusing on academics, pure structure, we lose the ability to recognize that kids can't learn when they're flooded with emotion. We can't learn when we're flooded with emotion. Children do not have the language to articulate all of their emotions. Ignoring and avoidance is typically the worst response you can do because it just lets it fester. Emotions fester and it doesn't give you an opportunity to get resolution.
We have to acknowledge that this was hard, and we have to take day by day, making sure we're working with our staff and with our students to make sure that they feel comfortable, safe, and welcome back. During this time of trauma, during this time of fear and anxiety, if you take a little bit more time on that personal connection, love, and I'm here for you, and then hop back into moving forward on the curriculum, I'm okay with that. I believe that's where we should all be.
Okay. That video introduced the module, and now I'm going to spend the rest of the time showing and describing what else is included in this module. There are 3 units. The first one is self-care. In this unit, you'll examine your role in crisis and response and in nurturing resilience in yourself and in your school community. You'll explore how the recent crisis has affected your resilience, and you'll learn routines that can help reduce your stress and support your journey to recovery. In Unit 3, that's caring for each other, you'll focus on ways you and your colleagues can support each other in the workplace and during the crisis. And in Unit 3, student care, you'll focus on ways you can support your students during and after a crisis. You'll learn about how students react to crises and how to help strengthen their resilience by giving them a sense of safety and security. And finally, we're offering supplemental student activities for you to do with your students, both in person and remote adaptations that focus on skills on topics known to support students' coping and well-being. And I need to note that this module is not a mental health counseling. If you think anyone in your school community needs the assistance of a mental health professional, please reach out and get that support right away. Okay, now I'm going to describe a little bit more in detail what's in each unit, starting with Unit 1, self-care. Okay. In Unit 1, you'll find an overview of the research about resilience, a self-inventory of how stressful events have affected you, and self-assessment surveys and concrete strategies for self-care. Okay, so how are the modules organized? If you're implementing this school-wide, we have a kickoff PowerPoint that can be used with all staff to introduce the module. Staff will then do individual learning on their own through a series of short, focused, what we are calling micro-learnings that can be typically be done in 10 to 15-minute increments each. And what you see on this slide now lists all of the micro-learnings that are in Unit 1 on self-care. They are designed to be done either on your desktop or on a mobile device when it's convenient for you. We recommend that you space these out rather than doing them all at once for best learning retention and for chances to apply some of the things that you're learning as you go. We also include an implementation planning guide that gives recommendations for small group learning, pacing, and staff check-ins. Okay, I don't have time in this webinar to go through what's in all of the micro-learnings, but I'm hoping to give you a sampling of at least one micro-learning from each unit. This is a peek into some of the basic content of the second micro-learning in Unit 1, Self-Care, Reactions, and Recovery. We all react to crises differently. Some of us cry and reach out to others for support, while others retreat and find solace on their own. Although there's no typical or normal reaction, it is normal to have some increase in adverse mental health symptoms following a crisis. It can even be helpful. What do these symptoms look like in adults? What can you do to support your own natural resilience and ability to recover? In this micro-learning, you'll take a look at your own reactions to the crisis and then identify areas that can support your coping and recovery. For example, these are some of the common reactions to a crisis that the learner will explore. Disasters, crises, and emergencies, they take a psychological toll. Affected people can experience increase in anxiety and depression and also post-traumatic stress disorder. It's important to know that crises don't always lead to mental illness though. In fact, recovery and resilience are the norm. This is one of the big things that we want learners to walk away with, that it's normal to have these reactions, and in most cases, it gets better over time. However, in some instances, it doesn't, and that's when it might be necessary to seek additional support. In this particular micro-learning, learners will take an inventory of how they've personally reacted to the crisis, understand some of the things that are out of their control, and then focus on what they can control and strategies that can help them cope. Then the rest of the micro-learnings in Unit 2 focus on helping you with those strategies. All right, on to Unit 2. This is caring for each other. All right, this unit includes assessments to examine expectations of yourself and others during crisis and stressful events, and strategies for connecting with and supporting others during times of extreme stress. Okay, and these are the micro-learnings you'll find in that unit. We have setting intentions, asking for help, expressing gratitude, recognizing each other, and a reflection. All right, this is a small sample of what you can expect to find in the Unit 2 micro-learning expressing gratitude. You're not alone if you find yourself dwelling on negative aspects of your situation right now. As humans, we're hardwired to pay more attention to negatives than to positives. It's what has kept us alive. Sometimes it's a matter of survival. Researchers call this a negativity bias, but this negativity bias can take a toll on your mental health and add to the stress you're already experiencing. You can combat this natural negativity bias by intentionally paying more attention to what's going right and expressing gratitude for it. Okay, what it is. This is a well-researched, evidence-based routine that helps combat negativity bias, buffer stress, and strengthen bonds. It can be done publicly, for example, at the close of a meeting, or privately, for example, in a journal. The gist of the routine is to stop and think of the things you're grateful for, small or large. The key is to attune yourself to paying more attention to the things that you appreciate or that bring you joy on a regular basis. For some, that might mean doing this routine every evening. For others, it may mean doing it 2 or 3 times a week. Okay, so why do it? Expressing gratitude regularly can change your mindset over time. It builds a habit of celebration and appreciation that can shift your mood to the positive. Expressing gratitude for what someone else has done has additional benefits too. It can help us see others' perspectives and can motivate us to do kind things for others in return. This helps foster positive emotional connections between you and your colleagues that will strengthen your collective ability to cope with challenging times. How it works. As I said, it can be done publicly or privately. The key is to be concrete and specific, go into detail instead of making a list, and focus more on people than things. Okay, I know we don't have a group chat function, but it would be great if you could respond to this question. What are you grateful for today? And perhaps Emily could share a few of those things out loud.
Absolutely. Fall weather, that is coming our way. The chance to at least see my kiddos online, even if not in person. That my loved ones are healthy. Lots of gratitude for family and friends. For life in general. That I have a job. Dogs and husbands, those are big winners. Supportive administrative staff in our building.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice.
Clean air. Yeah. Smoke-free air. So lots of people getting past the fires, which is good.
Yeah, I appreciate that up here in the Pacific Northwest. We've had it bad too. Thank you for sharing. And I'm personally grateful for all of you and what you're doing to educate our students right now during this incredibly stressful time. Okay, so moving on to Unit 3, Student Care. This unit includes tools to assess and monitor your students throughout the recovery process, strategies for connecting with and supporting students during time of extreme stress, activities you can do with your students to support their resilience. Okay, there are 7 microlearnings in the student care unit, and here they are. Students' reactions and recovery, keep it consistent, build connections, banking time, voice and choice, start talking, and a reflection. Again, I don't have time to go through them all, but I do want to highlight the start talking unit. Students who are coping with stress and uncertainty often have questions and want to talk about what's going on. As educators, sometimes we avoid difficult conversations with students because we don't want to say the wrong thing or add to their anxiety. But right now, what students need most for you is to talk with them and really listen to what they say. Your perspective or reassurance can often provide the sense of safety they need. In this microlearning, you'll learn strategies for talking with your students about COVID-19 related issues or other crises. Even if you say very little, your attention and careful listening can provide comfort and reassurance. Okay, I want to share with you this video from the Start Talking Microlearning by a resilience expert, Dr. Janine Jones from the University of Washington. She gives us some guidance for how we can talk with students during this stressful time.
We're here with Dr. Janine Jones today to talk about ways that teachers can engage in conversations with students that will build their resilience. Welcome, Janine.
Thank you.
Can you give us some general guidelines or things that teachers need to think about when they either want to have a planned conversation with their students or when they overhear students who are concerned about something and they want to bring them into that conversation?
In general, you want to make sure that you create space and open up space for conversations to happen. You also want to make sure that you use really good listening skills. So that means like taking time to hear and let them know that they've been heard. And you want to make sure that you're really honest and telling the most accurate information that you can that's developmentally appropriate for them. And then finally, you want to know at least one or two strengths that they have that you can really tap into as they're dealing with difficult things. I think it's important for teachers to set up a regularly scheduled, structured time for communication around emotion, but setting up the time so that it is predictable, expected, and students will know that they will have a place and a space to be able to talk about how they're feeling. So when you're creating the time or the opportunity for discussion, I probably wouldn't do them based on one child having a reaction that everybody saw. Meaning if a child, let's say a child kind of breaks down during the day and everybody sees it and they're difficult to console, that's not the time to create the group discussion. But creating the opportunity that is consistent and predictable is important, because then kids can know how to hold what they need to talk about to that space because they know it's going to be there and they can count on it being there.
Is there more to being a good listener as the teacher than those classic active listening skills?
The skills are a little bit different in this context. Active listening, as you know, does mean doing things like eye contact and changing your voice. Because we're in the context of crises, you want to make sure that your voice is calm and you use a speech pattern that's a bit slower because most people are prone to anxiety. So you want to do things that reduce that. Allow for silence, don't fill the silence because it's uncomfortable, and to do things like reflection. And reflection is where you repeat back what you heard, but not real formally. It's more like reflecting using the same words that you heard so that the person feels heard. For listening, doing your very best to not infuse your own emotion on kids. Sometimes we'll give another word for a feeling, like they say, I feel scared, and we say, you're feeling anxiety. We want to use their words back because they know what that means to them. You want to always give accurate information. If you're asked a question that you are really not sure about the answer, all you have to say is, let me get back to you on that because I think I need to do a little research. Something like that is a perfectly appropriate way to respond to any age of kids.
Can we talk a little bit about the strengths piece?
Recognize that what we're trying to get to is coping skills. What makes them feel safe and comfortable and competent? And those are the things that we need to tap into when we're in times of crisis. If people have a strength in being social and connect with other people really well, or they support other people really well, that's a coping skill. For highlighting strengths don't make up a strength for a child. If you don't know what their strengths are, ask them. If they don't give you any, ask a colleague or ask their parent until you find some, so that at least you've got a few, or you spend time during your day intentionally watching for stuff that they do well that you can tap into. What draws you to them? That's the easiest way to find a strength in an individual.
Okay. Jen, could you put the screen back up? There we go. All right. Normally, I'd have us all share our ideas around this, but I don't want to run out of time. So this is just going to be kind of a reflective question for yourself. What are some ways you can actively learn about your students' strengths? So just think about that. Okay. And finally, I want to briefly tell you about the supplemental student activities that we are including with this module. These are short, research-based student activities designed to help teachers support students' coping and recovery following a crisis. Each activity focuses on a topic or skill known to support students' coping and well-being. All the activities are standalone, so teachers can choose the activities that meet their students' needs. The activities are simple, they require few materials, and they can be adapted for remote learning. Some are meant to be taught once, and others will be most effective if reinforced with ongoing practice. Okay, this is the list of activities. The activities are K through 12. This slide shows the K-5 elementary activities that we are offering. I'll give you just a few seconds to read through this list on your own. Okay, and then the next slide shows the middle and high school activities. I'll give you a couple more seconds to read through these activities. Okay. All of these activities are included in the module after Unit 3 as downloadable PDFs. All right, now I'm going to show you how you can gain access and participate in the field testing of this module. First, I want to say this is a field test. Content and design are not final. That's why your feedback is so important to us. We're asking participants to complete a short survey at the end of each unit and on the supplemental student activity page. The surveys are less than 5 minutes each, and they're only going to be used to help us improve the program for educators and students going through these crises, these challenging times. All right. Okay, so to access the module, all you need to do is go to this URL up on the screen, fill in the form, and create your login and password. And you're in. So some of the questions that have come, can you use the current second step login if you're a second step user right now? No, you have to create your own login, as this is a prototype tool, and also every individual will need to create their own separate login. All right, so these are my parting words to you. And I am going to hand it back over to Jen so she can do a little bit of the wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. That is a lot of information to take in. I'm so glad to see that we have been able to share all that, and we'll have a lot in, I'm sure, in the follow-up too. So I'm just going to cruise through because we don't have very much time, and I want to make sure you have time to answer some questions. We do have some additional resources that we can share with you today that might be helpful in terms of helping to respond to trauma, to rebuild community, and so on. So if you go to our website, if you go to the secondstep.org COVID-19 support, and I'll show you, I think we have that URL in there somewhere, you'll find some great things. Right now we have free access to our child protection all staff training, as well as the bullying prevention all staff training. We have our grades K through 8 community rebuilding unit. These are brand new units you can use if you're using Second Step, or even if you're not, specifically to support that in-person community building efforts. There are 5 weeks of activities, about 30 minutes each. So hopefully you'll take a look at those. We're also decided to share that we have 15 of our mindfulness sessions through our Mind Yeti program. No experience necessary. You can find that on mindyeti.com, another great resource for helping calm down some of those big emotions. Speaking of big emotions, we also have our Imagine Neighborhood podcast for kids and their grown-ups. This really helps kind of get right to the heart of the ways that kids and families are feeling. It's really engaging and fun. So just go to imagineneighborhood.org. And then we also have our child abuse prevention resources on hotchocolatetalk.org. It's a resource to help families and educators to talk with children about child sexual abuse. And then the last one is resources for addressing racism. I mentioned at the top of this webinar about how structural racism is a big factor in trauma and ACEs. So these are some organizations that we have, we would recommend: Teaching Tolerance, Facing History in Ourselves, and the Greater Good Science Center. For program users, Second Step program users, we will also be giving you a guide on anti-racism practices and some of these resources you can tap into of other organizations. So I know it doesn't leave us very much time, but I do want to mention that there's a resources slide on this PowerPoint, so hopefully we can send that out to you in the follow-up.
We've got just a few minutes for questions, but we'll go ahead and get through what we can. So one question that came in, are the modules within that resilience curriculum something that teachers do on their own or in a PLC? What's the model kind of look like?
Yeah, in the implementation guide I talked about, we have different ways you could do it. The microlearnings are designed to be done individually, and we have some suggestions for then bringing together as a PLC as well. In our SEL for Adults program, we are developing both individual learnings and PLCs, but for this one, we just give some guidance around it.
Yeah, that's great. And it's good you moved up that timeline because we all need this right now. It looks wonderful. So lots of questions around, is the curriculum free in terms of the field testing and what's available to folks?
The resilience module is free and open to everyone through the end of the year. And then at the end of the year, we will gather up the feedback and decide how to move forward with this particular module.
Great. And we did put that link for the field testing into the chat, and we will share that in the follow-up email as well. So everyone has that. We'll take one last question. With suicide rates increasing among youth, are there activities within the module that specifically relate to suicide prevention and awareness?
Yeah, that's not an area that we focused on. It's a little, it goes into mental health. So we are talking more about universal resilience rather than suicide prevention. So no, it doesn't really address that, unless only in the case where there's been a suicide in a school, where then the whole school has experienced a crisis. So it's in response to a crisis. So a suicide at a school could be that crisis.